I walked inside on my 17th birthday and found a stranger in my bed. My mother just smiled and told me to grow up, but she was asking for more than a room. She was demanding my identity to hide a financial secret that would ruin them. I left that night without screaming. I simply vanished. Then I watched as they dismantled their own lives, piece by piece. My name is Eden Calloway, and the first thing I noticed when I walked into the house wasn't the smell of birthday cake. It was the silence. It was a Tuesday in Cincinnati, a gray and dripping kind of day that soaked right through your coat. And I had just finished an 8-hour shift at Bright Moss Market. My feet were throbbing inside my cheap sneakers, keeping time with the dull ache in my lower back. I had spent the last hour of my 17th birthday restocking the frozen food aisle, listening to the hum of the compressors and imagining that maybe, just maybe, when I got home, there would be a small celebration. Nothing grand, just an acknowledgement that I had survived another year. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door. The house was warm, but it felt wrong. It felt shifted, like furniture had been moved in the dark. "Mom," I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the hallway. "Grant?" No answer. I walked up the stairs, my hand sliding along the banister. All I wanted was to take off my uniform vest, which smelled like cardboard and sanitizer, and lie down on my bed. I wanted to stare at the glow-in-the-dark stars I had stuck to my ceiling when I was 10. I turned the corner toward the second door on the left, my sanctuary, the one place in this house where I didn't have to perform gratitude for the bare minimum. I stopped dead. My door was closed. That wasn't unusual. What stopped my heart was the piece of lined notebook paper taped to the wood at eye level. It was written in pink marker, the eyes dotted with little hearts. Sloane's room. I stared at it. I blinked, sure that the exhaustion was making me hallucinate. Sloane Mercer was my brother's girlfriend. She had been hanging around for months, filling our living room with her perfume and her passive-aggressive compliments. But she didn't live here. She had an apartment across town. I reached for the knob. Locked. "What is this?" I whispered to no one. I pounded on the door. "Grant Sloane." The door to my parents' bedroom opened down the hall. My mother, Heather, stepped out. She was wearing her comfortable robe, holding a mug of tea, looking for all the world like nothing was wrong. She looked at me, then at the door, and then she offered a tight, dismissive smile. "Oh, you're home," she said. "Not happy birthday, just an observation of my presence." "Mom, why is my door locked?" I asked, my voice trembling. "And why is there a note with Sloane's name on it?" Heather took a sip of her tea. "Lower your voice, Eden. Grant and Sloane are resting. It's been a very stressful day for them." "For them," I pointed at the door. "That is my room." "Well, actually," she said, walking past me toward the stairs as if I were a minor inconvenience she needed to step around. Sloane had a situation with her roommate. It was toxic. She needed a safe place to land. And we are family. We help the family. I followed her, my chest tightening. "So, she's staying in the guest room." "The guest room is full of your father's exercise equipment and the old boxes," Heather said breezy. "It's not suitable for living. Your room has the best light, and it's isolated. Sloane needs peace right now." "So where am I sleeping?" She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned to look at me. Her expression was perfectly calm, the kind of calm that made you feel like you were the crazy one for asking questions. "We set up the cot in the laundry room, just for now, until things settle down." The laundry room. The unfinished basement room with the cement floor, the constant hum of the dryer, and the smell of bleach. "You gave my room to your son's girlfriend," I said, the words feeling heavy and sharp in my mouth. "On my 17th birthday." "Oh, Eden, stop it," she snapped. "You're 17, not 7. You don't need a shrine to yourself. You're practically an adult. Learn to be generous." Before I could respond, the door upstairs, my door opened. Grant walked out. My brother was 22, but he still had the smug entitlement of a teenager who had never been told no. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, scratching his head. "Why are you yelling?" Grant asked. leaning over the railing. Sloane is trying to nap. She's had a migraine all day. She's in my bed. Grant, I said, looking up at him. It's a bed, he scoffed. Don't be so territorial. Mom said it was fine. Besides, you're barely home with that job of yours. What do you need all that space for? Where are my things? I asked. The panic was starting to set in now. My clothes, my sketches, my books. We packed them up, Grant said, to keep them safe. I ran down the rest of the stairs, past my mother, and looked around the living room. Nothing. I went to the kitchen. Nothing. Then I saw it. Under the hollow space beneath the staircase, jammed into the corner where the vacuum cleaner usually sat, black trash bags. 3 of them, lumpy and misshapen. I fell to my knees and ripped the first one open. My sweaters, my school uniform, my jeans, all thrown in together like garbage. I tore open the second bag and felt something shatter inside me. It was my keepsake box. The vintage wooden box Grandpa had given me before he passed. It held the only things that mattered to me: his letters from the war, the Polaroids from my childhood, the ribbons I had won in middle school art contests. The box was crushed. The wood was splintered on one side, and it was sitting in a puddle of water that had leaked from the nearby dehumidifier. I pulled it out, my hands shaking. The letters inside were damp. The ink on one of the photos had started to bleed. You threw this under the stairs. I looked up at them. My mother was standing in the kitchen doorway, and Grant had come down to stand on the bottom step. It was in the way, Grant said, shrugging. We needed to clear the shelves for Sloane's crystals and her books. We didn't know where else to put that junk. It's not junk, I choked out. It's Grandpa's. It's clutter, Heather corrected. She checked the clock on the stove. Look, Eden, I know we talked about maybe ordering pizza for your birthday, but honestly, the vibe in here is terrible now. Grant is exhausted, and Sloane is too stressed to be around this kind of negative energy. Negative energy. I stood up, clutching the damp box to my chest. You evicted me from my own life. We are making space for our family. Heather raised her voice, her mask of calm slipping just enough to show the irritation underneath. Why do you always have to make everything about you Sloane is going through a crisis? Can't you just be a good person for once and support her? I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, and I searched for a single flicker of guilt in her eyes. There was none. She felt entirely justified, in her mind. I was the villain for wanting a bed to sleep in. Did you ask me? I asked. My voice was quiet, deadly steady. Did you ask me even once before you put my life in garbage bags? Silence. The kitchen hummed. The rain tapped against the window. Grant looked away, feigning interest in his fingernails. Heather just sighed, a long, dramatic exhale of a martyr dealing with a difficult child. We made an executive decision, she said finally. Go downstairs. Eden, set up your cot. We can talk about this when you're less emotional. She turned her back on me and walked into the living room. Switching on the TV, Grant smirked, a quick flash of victory, and turned to go back upstairs back to my room. I stood there for a long minute, the damp wood of the box pressed against my ribs. I realized then that I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was waiting for a reason to stay, and they hadn't given me one. I turned and walked toward the basement door. I didn't slam it. I closed it softly. I walked down the wooden steps to the laundry room. It was freezing. The air smelled of detergent and mildew. My cot was there, a flimsy metal thing folded against the wall. Next to it was a pile of dirty laundry that hadn't been washed yet. I sat on the cold floor, not bothering to unfold the cot. I could hear them upstairs, the muffled sound of the TV, the creak of the floorboards, my floorboards. Then, I heard voices drifting down through the ventilation shaft. It was a quirk of the house. The vent in the laundry room connected directly to the kitchen. You think she'll actually sleep down there? Grant's voice, amusement in his tone. She has nowhere else to go, Heather replied. Her voice was clear, stripped of the fake concern she used when looking at me. Besides, She's dramatic. She'll get over it by tomorrow. Sloane really likes the view from that window, Grant said. Thanks, Mom. Don't worry about it. Honey, Heather said. And then she said the words that froze the blood in my veins, the words that killed the girl I was 5 minutes ago and woke up someone entirely different. Eden can take it. She always takes it. She's just convenient. I sat in the dark, clutching my grandfather's ruined letters. Convenient. That was all I was. A placeholder until someone more important needed the space. I looked at the small, high window near the ceiling of the basement. The rain was slashing against the glass. I looked at my trash bags. I wasn't going to sleep on that cot. Not tonight. Not ever. Sitting on the cold concrete floor of the laundry room, I realized that the word my mother had used, convenient, was the most honest thing she had said to me in years. It was the key that unlocked the code of the Calloway household. This wasn't a sudden madness that had descended upon them today. This was simply the finale of a show I had been forced to star in since I was old enough to walk. The script had always been simple: Grant is fragile, and Eden is durable. I closed my eyes and the memories played out like a montage of petty injustices that I had swallowed down like bitter medicine. I remembered being 10 years old, sitting in the middle seat of our minivan for a 12-hour road trip to Florida because Grant, who was 15 at the time, claimed he needed the window seat for his motion sickness. He spent the entire ride playing Game Boy and eating cheese curls while I was crushed between a cooler and a car seat, sweating and silent. When I complained, my father just sighed, and my mother gave me that look, the one that said I was being difficult. Grant is sensitive, she would say, smoothing his hair. You're strong, Eden. You can handle it. Being strong turned out to be a trap. It just meant they didn't have to worry about me. It meant I required zero maintenance, so they could pour all their fuel into the sputtering engine that was my brother. The dynamic became an unwritten law. If Grant was happy, the house was a democracy. We could laugh. We could watch movies. We could eat dinner together. But if Grant was in a bad mood, if he lost a video game, if a girl rejected him, if his boss looked at him wrong, the house became a dictatorship of silence. We walked on tiptoes. We spoke in whispers. My parents would scramble to fix whatever minor inconvenience had upset him, offering money, food, or praise to soothe the beast, and I would just disappear into my room. But then came Sloane. She had drifted into our lives about 6 months ago, clinging to Grant's arm like a decorative accessory. Sloane was pretty in a way that required a lot of effort: perfect hair extensions, long acrylic nails, and a voice that was permanently pitched at a whine. She realized very quickly how this family worked. She saw that playing the victim was the quickest way to Heather Calloway's heart. Mom fell in love with her. I think she saw Sloane as the daughter she actually wanted, someone who needed her, someone who validated her need to mother people. It started small. Eden, let Sloane use the shower first. She has an interview. I would end up showering in lukewarm water. Eden, borrow Sloane that sweater. She's cold. I never got it back. Then it got invasive. 2 months ago, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. I need the spare key to your document box, she said. I had a small, fireproof safe in my closet. I had bought it with my own money to store my birth certificate, my Social Security card, and the savings bonds Grandpa had left me for college. It was the only thing I owned that felt truly private. Why? I had asked, guarding my backpack. Because Sloane needs to put some of her jewelry somewhere safe when she stays over, Mom said, chopping vegetables aggressively. And she loses things. If we put it in your box, we know it is safe. She can get her own box, I said. Eden, stop being selfish. It is just a metal box. Give me the key. I gave it to her. I gave it to her because it was easier than fighting a 3-hour war over a piece of metal. I didn't check the box after that. I just assumed that my mother, despite her favoritism, still respected the basic boundary of the law. I was stupid. The financial disparity was even worse. When Grant turned 20, my parents bought him a used Honda Civic. It wasn't new, but it was solid. They spent $4,000 on it, claiming he needed it to get to work. Grant held that job for exactly 3 weeks before quitting because the manager was disrespectful. He kept the car. When I needed to take the ACTs and SATs, the fees totaled around $150. I asked my dad for the money during dinner. Mom had chimed in before he could answer. "Money is tight right now, honey. We just had to pay for Grant's insurance deductible. Can't you pick up an extra shift at the market?" So I did. I restocked shelves until midnight to pay for my own standardized tests while Grant drove his free car to hang out with his friends. I sat there in the laundry room, shivering as the damp cold seeped through my jeans, and the full picture came into focus. They didn't hate me. Hate would imply passion. They just viewed me as a resource. I was the spare tire. I was the backup generator. And now that Sloan, the shiny new object, needed space, I was simply being archived. The birthday dinner tonight was never going to happen. I realize that now. The surprise wasn't a party. The surprise was the eviction. They had planned this. They had waited for me to be at work, so they wouldn't have to deal with my drama while they bagged up my life. I pulled my phone out. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from rage. I needed a lifeline. I dialed my father. Ron Calloway was a man who had perfected the art of being invisible in his own home. He worked long hours at the plant and spent his weekends tinkering in the garage, mostly to avoid the emotional hurricanes my mother and brother created. He picked up on the third ring. "Hello." "Dad?" I said, my voice cracking. They moved Sloan into my room. They put my stuff in trash bags. There was a long pause on the line. I could hear the background noise of a television. He wasn't at the plant. He was likely in the garage, hiding. "I know, Eden," he said, his voice heavy with fatigue. "You know," I whispered, "it's my birthday, Dad, and you let them kick me out of my bedroom." "Your mother thought it was best," he said, the standard excuse for everything that went wrong in our lives. "Sloan is going through a hard time. Her roommate kicked her out. We couldn't leave her on the street. So you put me in the laundry room. It's temporary. Kiddo, just don't make a big thing of it. Okay, your mom is really tired. She's been cleaning all day to get the room ready. Just keep the peace tonight. We'll figure something out later." "Keep the peace," I repeated, the family motto. Keep the peace so Grant doesn't explode. Keep the peace so Mom doesn't cry. "I love you, Dad," I said, testing him. "But this isn't right. Just hang in there, Eden. We'll talk in the morning." He hung up. I stared at the black screen of my phone. "We'll talk in the morning." No, we wouldn't. Because in the morning, I would be expected to wake up on a cot, make coffee, and smile at the girl who was sleeping in my bed. In the morning, the new normal would set in, and I would be the girl who lived in the basement. I looked at the trash bags again. They were tied with double knots. My mother was efficient like that. I stood up. The house was quiet above me. They were probably watching a movie, eating the popcorn I had bought with my employee discount. They thought I was down here crying. They thought I was sulking. And that by tomorrow, I would accept my demotion like a good little soldier. They were wrong. I wasn't a guest here. I wasn't a tenant they could shuffle around. But if they were going to treat me like a stranger, I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would be gone. I reached for the first trash bag. I wasn't going to unpack it. I was going to take it with me. But first, I needed to check one thing. A nagging suspicion clawed at the back of my mind, something about the way Grant had looked when I mentioned my stuff. Something about the security of that document box. I untied the bag containing the broken wooden box. I dug past the damp photos and found the heavy metal lockbox. It was still locked. I felt a moment of relief, but then I looked closer at the keyhole. There were scratches around the metal. Tiny, silver scratches where someone had jammed a key in, perhaps a little too forcefully, or perhaps a copy that didn't quite fit right. I didn't have the key anymore, Mom had it. But I didn't need it to know that the sanctity of this box had been violated. And if they had been inside this box, they had access to more than just my birth certificate. I grabbed the handle of the trash bag. Tonight wasn't just about a room. Tonight was an escape attempt. I was leaving, and I wasn't coming back until I burned their little fantasy world to the ground. The single light bulb in the laundry room buzzed like a trapped fly. I did not sit back down on the cot. I did not unfold the scratchy wool blanket my mother had tossed onto the pile of dirty towels. Instead, I moved with the precise, frantic energy of a thief in my own home. I had to be fast. I had to be silent. I knelt beside the black trash bags and began to filter the wreckage of my life. I ignored the clothes. I could buy jeans at a thrift store. I could buy t-shirts anywhere. I was looking for the hard currency of my existence. I found my laptop case wedged between a winter coat and an old pair of boots. I pulled it out and checked the zipper. It was intact. Next, I dug for my art portfolio. This was non-negotiable. It held 2 years of charcoal sketches and watercolor studies. The physical proof of the talent I hoped would get me a scholarship far away from Cincinnati. It was while I was shifting a box of books that I saw it. My mother had seemingly swept everything off the floor of my room into these bags, and she hadn't been careful about separating my things from the items Sloane had already started scattering around. There was a stack of fashion magazines that definitely weren't mine, and beneath them, a crumpled white envelope. I picked it up. The return address was for a bank I did not use. I banked with the local credit union where I deposited my meager checks from Bright Moss Market. This envelope was from a major national bank, but the name in the clear plastic window was mine, Eden Calloway. The envelope had already been torn open. I pulled out the letter inside. It was a statement for a credit card. I scanned the numbers, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The balance due was nearly $1,200. My breath hitched. I had never applied for a credit card. I was 17. I couldn't apply for one without a cosigner, and even then, I wouldn't have been approved for this kind of limit. I looked at the transaction dates. They went back 3 months. I shoved the letter into the front pocket of my hoodie. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that made my hands shake. This wasn't just unfairness anymore. This was dangerous. This was a crime. Suddenly, a sharp rap on the laundry room door made me freeze. Eden. It was Heather. She didn't open the door. She didn't try the handle. She just knocked. A quick, perfunctory sound to remind me she was still the warden. "I am going to bed," she said through the woods. Her voice was muffled but clear. "Don't make this a whole drama production tonight. We will figure out the logistics tomorrow. Just sleep it off." I stared at the door handle. I forced my voice to be flat, dead, empty. "Okay, Mom. Good night." "Good night," she said. I heard her footsteps recede, moving toward the kitchen and then up the stairs. I waited 5 seconds, then 10. I pulled out my phone. My battery was at 40%. Enough. I scrolled to the contact I hadn't used in months because my mother always called her that woman, Aunt Tessa. Tessa Hart was my mother's sister. But they were nothing alike. Tessa lived in Louisville, about an hour and a half away. She was the black sheep because she refused to play the Callaway games. I typed the message, my thumbs flying. "Aunt Tessa, I need to leave. Tonight. Can you come get me? Please." I stared at the screen, watching the 3 dots appear almost instantly. I held my breath. If she said no, if she asked questions, if she told me to wait until morning, I was trapped. The phone buzzed. "I'm putting my shoes on. Are you safe right now?" "Yes," I typed, "but I can't stay." "Pack a bag," she replied. "Meet me at the corner of Oak and Vine in 90 minutes. Keep your phone on silent." "I am coming." Relief washed over me, cold and clarifying. I looked at the trash bags. I couldn't take everything. I grabbed my school backpack and dumped out the textbooks. I stuffed the portfolio in, bending the edges slightly, which hurt my soul. But I had no choice. I jammed the laptop in. I found the envelope with my cash tips from the market, about $80, and shoved it into my pocket with the credit card statement. I took one change of clothes, my toothbrush, and the broken wooden box with Grandpa's letters. Upstairs. A new sound began, a heavy rhythmic thumping, bass. Grant and Sloane were playing music. In my room, the song was loud. Some pop tracks that were popular on the radio. They had turned the volume up high enough that the floorboards above me vibrated. They were celebrating. They were marking their territory. drowning out any guilt they might have felt with noise. It was perfect. The music meant they wouldn't hear the back door open. I zipped my backpack. It was heavy, pulling at my shoulders. But the weight felt good. It felt like an anchor I could control. I took one last look at the laundry room, the gray cement floor, the lonely cot, the pile of dirty towels. I didn't feel sad. I felt a strange, detached lightness. It was the feeling of a severed limb the pain hadn't registered yet, just the shock of separation. I crept up the basement stairs. I reached the landing that opened into the kitchen. The music was louder here. I could hear Sloane laughing, a high-pitched shriek of delight. I turned the deadbolt on the back door. It clicked. I waited. The music didn't stop. No one came running. I slipped out into the night. The rain had turned into a steady, freezing drizzle. The air smelled of wet asphalt and dead leaves. I closed the door behind me, engaging the lock so it would still be secured from the outside. I didn't want them to know I was gone. Not until morning. I wanted a head start. I walked down the driveway, sticking to the grass so my shoes wouldn't crunch on the gravel. I passed Grant's car. I passed my parents' SUV. I didn't look back at the house. I fixed my eyes on the street lamp at the end of the block. The walk to Oak and Vine took 10 minutes. I stood in the shadow of a large maple tree, shielded from the streetlights, shivering as the rain soaked through my hoodie. Every pair of headlights that swept past made me flinch, terrifying me that it might be my father coming to find me, or the police, but nobody came. The neighborhood was asleep. Exactly 85 minutes later, a silver sedan pulled up to the curb. The passenger window rolled down. Tessa looked older than I remembered. Her hair was cut short, and she looked tired, but her eyes were fierce. "Get in," she said. I opened the door and threw my backpack onto the floorboard. I slid into the seat. The car was warm. It smelled of peppermint and old coffee. "Seatbelt," Tessa commanded as she put the car in gear. We didn't speak as she pulled away from the curb. We didn't speak as we navigated the quiet suburban streets and turned onto the on-ramp for the interstate. I watched the lights of Cincinnati blur into streaks of yellow and red against the wet glass. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Heather. She must have gone downstairs to check the lock or load the washer and found the empty room. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back and play the victim later. You are breaking this family apart." I read the words. I looked at the timestamp. She didn't ask where I was. She didn't ask if I was safe. She was already building her narrative. She was already drafting the speech she would give to the neighbors about her rebellious, difficult daughter who ran away for no reason. I looked at Tessa. She was driving with both hands on the wheel. Her jaw set tight. She wasn't asking me for explanations. She was just driving. I looked back down at the phone. I didn't type a response. I didn't defend myself. I pressed the power button on the side of the phone and held it down until the screen went black. The silence in the car was different from the silence in the house. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. "I'm okay," I whispered, mostly to myself. Tessa glanced at me, her expression softening just a fraction. "You will be," she said, "but not tonight. Tonight, we will just drive." I leaned my head against the cool window and watched the darkness swallow the life I used to know. The drive to Louisville had been a blur of rain and exhaustion, but waking up in Aunt Tessa's house was like waking up on a different planet. Her house was a small, brick bungalow in a quiet neighborhood where the trees actually touched over the street. It wasn't grand. It didn't have the high ceilings or the expensive crown molding that my mother insisted on back in Cincinnati. But it was clean. It was warm, and it was logical. I opened my eyes to sunlight hitting a pale yellow wall. I wasn't in the laundry room. I wasn't listening to the hum of a dehumidifier. Tessa was standing in the doorway holding a stack of linens. She didn't barge in. She knocked on the open doorframe. "Morning," she said. Her voice was low, lacking that frantic edge I was used to. I cleared out the craft supplies. "The closet is empty. The dresser is empty. This room is yours. Eden." I sat up, pulling the quilt tighter around me. "For how long?" "For as long as you need it," she said firmly. She walked over and set the towels on the end of the bed. I don't have rules about when you wake up or what you eat, but I do have one rule: I don't enter this room without knocking. This is your space. You don't have to earn it. I looked at her, and my throat went tight. You don't have to earn it. In my house, space was currency. You paid for it with compliance. Over the next 3 days, Tessa proved she wasn't just offering a hideout. She was offering a foundation. She didn't encourage me to drop out or run wild. She sat me down at her kitchen table with a notepad and a phone. She called the school district, because she was my aunt and I was 17. She couldn't legally enroll me permanently without parental consent, but she managed to work out a temporary hardship transfer, citing family instability. She was fierce on the phone, polite, but immovable. She made sure I didn't lose my semester. By Friday, I had a job. I walked into a place called Lark and Pine Books, a cozy independent bookstore a few blocks from Tessa's house. It smelled of old paper and roasted coffee beans. I asked for an application, and the owner, a woman with silver braids named Mrs. Higgins, interviewed me on the spot. I told her I could work weekends and evenings. She hired me to start Monday. For the first time in my life, I started to understand what the word exhale really meant. Dinner at Tessa's was a revelation. We ate spaghetti on a Wednesday night. We sat at the small round table. The TV was off. There was no tension. In Cincinnati, dinner was a minefield. We all had to gauge Grant's mood before we picked up a fork. If Grant was sulking, we ate in silence. If Grant was manic and loud, we had to laugh at his jokes. If Sloane was there, we had to listen to her complain about her coworkers while Mom nodded sympathetically. Here, Tessa just asked. How is the geometry homework? Fine, I said, waiting for the catch, waiting for her to tell me I was chewing too loud or that I needed to clear the table faster. Good, she said. I am going to watch a documentary later. You are welcome to join, or you can go read. Whatever you want. I almost dropped my fork. Whatever you want. But the Callaway gravity tried to pull me back. My phone, which I had kept on silent, started lighting up with notifications on Thursday. It was Heather. Eden, I hope you have cooled off. I am sorry if you felt hurt by the room situation. You know how much I love you, but you have to understand. Grant is in a very fragile place, and Sloane is his support system. We need to support the people who are struggling. Please come home. We can discuss a better cot for the basement. I read the text 3 times. Sorry if you felt hurt. Not sorry I hurt you. And then, the immediate pivot to Grant. Even when I was gone, the universe still had to revolve around him. Then came the call from my dad. I answered it in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall. Eden. His voice sounded tired. Hi, Dad. Are you safe? Are you with Tessa? Yes. Okay, good. He sighed. A long, rattling sound. Look, honey, your mother is... She's really ramped up. The house is a mess. Grant is yelling because he can't find the remote, and Sloane is complaining about the vibe. I just want peace. Eden, can't you just come back and apologize? Just smooth it over so we can have a quiet weekend. I closed my eyes. You want me to apologize for being kicked out of my room? I want the yelling to stop, he said honestly. I just want things back to normal. Normal for you is silence for me, I said. I can't do it. Dad, I'm not coming back to sleep in the laundry room. I hung up before he could guilt me further. It hurt, but it was a clean hurt, like a Band-Aid being ripped off. He didn't miss me. He missed the buffer I provided between him and the chaos. I walked into the kitchen where Tessa was drinking tea. I sat down across from her. I had the backpack with me, the one I had taken that night. Tessa, I said, I need to show you something. I pulled out the crumpled envelope I had found in the trash bag. The credit card statement from the National Bank. Tessa put her mug down. She took the paper and put on her reading glasses. She scanned the document, her brow furrowing. This is a statement for a platinum rewards card, she said slowly. The limit is $5,000. The balance is $1,200. I didn't open it, I said. I bank at the credit union. I don't have a credit card. Tessa looked up at me. The softness was gone from her face. replaced by a steely sharpness. Eden, do you remember signing anything at all? Maybe when you got your driver's permit, or for school? No, I shook my head. Wait, a few months ago, Mom brought me a stack of papers. She said it was for insurance updates. I just signed where the little X stickers were. I was studying for finals. Tessa's lips pressed into a thin line. Get your laptop. We sat at the table for 2 hours. Tessa showed me how to request a credit report online. We had to answer security questions to verify my identity. When the file loaded, the room seemed to tilt. It wasn't just one card. There were 3. One credit card opened 6 months ago maxed out. Another one opened 3 months ago, the one I held in my hand. And a third inquiry for a personal loan that had been denied last week. Oh my God, I whispered. They bought furniture. Look at this. I pointed at the transaction history on the screen. Wayfair, Target, Best Buy. That's not groceries. Tessa, that's the new TV in the living room. That's the rug in Sloane's room. I felt sick, physically sick. I remembered Grant bragging about his new gaming setup. I remembered Mom showing off the new curtains. They hadn't just taken my physical space, they were funding their comfort with my future. Tessa sat back. Taking off her glasses, she looked furious. This isn't just bad parenting, Eden, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. This is identity theft. This is fraud. But they're my parents, I said, the denial still trying to protect me. Grant is my brother, and they are ruining your credit score before you even graduate high school. Tessa said, if you try to get a student loan next year, or an apartment, or a car, you will be denied. This red number right here. She pointed to the screen. This is an anchor around your neck. I looked at the list of transactions, dates, times, amounts, $200 at a liquor store, $60 at a nail salon. That was Sloane. I knew it. Sloane got her nails done every 2 weeks. My mother hadn't just given my room to my brother's girlfriend. She had given her my name. I thought it was just about the bedroom, I said, my voice trembling. It's never just about the room, Tessa said softly. It's about respect, and they don't respect you enough to protect you. They see you as a resource to be harvested. I stared at the laptop screen until the numbers blurred. The sadness I had felt about missing my dad, about the house, about my old life, it evaporated. In its place, something cold and hard settled in my chest. It was the realization that I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a co-signer. What do we do? I asked. Tessa looked at me. We stop the bleeding, and we make sure they can never use your name again. I nodded. I wasn't the girl in the laundry room anymore. I was a victim of a crime, and for the first time, I had the evidence to prove it. The glow of Tessa's laptop screen was the only light in the kitchen, casting long, harsh shadows across the table. We had been staring at the credit report for an hour, but every time I refreshed the page, I hoped the numbers would change. They didn't. There is another one, I said, pointing at the bottom of the list. It was a credit card issued by a retail bank, opened 4 months ago. The billing address was listed as 1402 Maplewood Drive, Cincinnati, Ohio, my parents' house, my house. Or at least, the house where I used to sleep. I clicked on the transaction history, and it was like looking into a mirror that reflected someone else's life. Sephora, $340. Urban Outfitters, $212. Apple Store, $1,100. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I looked at the date of the Apple charge. It was 2 weeks ago. I remembered that day. Sloane had come into the kitchen showing off her new phone, a rose gold model with 3 cameras. She had told Mom that she saved up tips for it. She bought her phone with my credit, I whispered. That's my name on the debt. Tessa. She's walking around with a phone I paid for. Tessa didn't look shocked. She looked efficient. She was already writing down the account numbers on a legal pad. We are going to call the fraud department, she said. But first, we need to lock everything down. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from our family group chat, a chat I hadn't left yet because I was too afraid to sever the last link. I picked it up. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I couldn't just sit here and be the victim anymore. I needed to know. I typed a message to Heather alone first. Mom, why is there a credit card in my name with charges for Sloane's things? Did you use my social security number? I watched the bubbles appear instantly. She was typing. Then she stopped. Then she typed again. You are being paranoid. You left the house. So the mail got confused. I was just organizing the bills. Don't be ridiculous. I'm looking at the report. Mom, I typed back. $1,100 for a phone. I didn't buy a phone. The response came back sharp and fast. You have been there for 3 days, and that woman has already poisoned you against your own family. We fed you for 17 years. Eden, do not talk to me about money. She didn't deny it. That was the thing that broke me. She didn't say no. That's impossible. She attacked me for asking. Then Grant's name popped up on my screen. Mom is crying. Thanks a lot. I stared at the screen. I found a credit card. Grant. I texted him. Did you know about this? You are making a huge deal out of nothing. Grant replied. It's just paper. We are going to pay it off. I have a job lined up next week. Don't ruin this for me. Eden, I finally have things going well. Ruin what I asked. My credit score. My life, he shot back. If you call the bank, you're going to cause problems for everyone. Just chill out. Then came the message from Sloane. It was a private message, not in the group chat. Hey, sweetie, it read, I know you're upset about the room situation, and I get it. Transitions are hard, but try to see the big picture. We're all pitching in to make this work. You're 17 now. It's time to grow up and stop keeping score. Family helps family. I read it twice. Grow up. She was 22, living in a stolen room, using a stolen credit card to buy makeup and tech, and telling me the high school student working at a bookstore to grow up. They aren't going to stop, I said to Tessa. They don't think they're doing anything wrong. They think they're entitled to my identity. Tessa took the phone from my hand and set it face down. That is why we stop talking and start acting. Eden, look at me. This is not a family dispute. This is financial predation. If we don't freeze this now, you will be paying for their lifestyle until you are 30. Do it, I said. We spent the next 2 hours in a war room of our own making. Tessa guided me through the websites of the 3 major credit bureaus. We created accounts. We answered security questions. Freeze, freeze, freeze. I watched the status change on the screen. File locked. It felt like slamming a heavy iron door shut. For the first time in days, I felt a tiny spark of power. They couldn't open anything new. If they tried to buy a toaster on credit tomorrow using my name, the computer would say no. Now we dispute the charges, Tessa said, picking up the landline. You are going to have to speak to the fraud investigator. You have to tell them you did not authorize these accounts. You have to be brave. Eden, you have to say the words. I took the phone. I spoke to a woman named Sarah at the bank. I told her my name. I told her I was a minor. I told her I did not sign the application. Do you know who might have had access to your personal information? Sarah asked. I looked at Tessa. I looked at the dark window where the rain was starting again. Yes, I said, my voice steady. My mother. When I hung up, I felt exhausted, like I had run a marathon, but the silence in my head was different now. It wasn't the silence of fear, it was the silence of focus. I sat back at the table and started to draw a timeline on the back of a napkin. Sloane moved in 6 months ago. First credit inquiry, 5 months and 3 weeks ago. Sloane lost her job and needed new clothes for interviews 4 months ago. The second credit card opened 4 months ago. It matched perfectly. They hadn't just used me for an emergency. They had used me as a strategy. Sloane had come into the house, realized Grant had no money and my parents were tapped out. They had collectively decided that the solution was the 17-year-old girl who never complained. They needed me, I realized aloud. They didn't want me to stay because they loved me. They wanted me to stay because they needed my signature. When they need you, they call it family, Tessa said, pouring more tea. When you need them, they call you a burden. My laptop dinged, a new email notification. I flinched. I had set up alerts on my credit monitoring account just an hour ago. New inquiry detected. "Someone is trying to run your credit right now," I said, leaning in. "But it's frozen. It blocked it." Then another email came through. This one wasn't from the monitoring service. It was a confirmation email from a local car dealership in Cincinnati. It must have been automatically forwarded to my old email address because it was linked to the account. Subject: "Congratulations on your new financing approval." I clicked it open. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Dear Eden, we are thrilled to confirm that your financing application for the 2021 Dodge Charger has been pre-approved based on the paperwork submitted this afternoon. Your co-signer status is confirmed." I scanned the details. The primary driver listed wasn't me. It was Grant Calloway. He wasn't buying a used car to get to work. He was buying a sports car. And he tried to put it in my name today, while I was sitting here, while he was texting me to chill out. "He bought a car," I choked out. "He tried to buy a car in my name an hour ago." Tessa stood up and walked behind me to look at the screen. Her hand gripped my shoulder hard. "He didn't buy it," she said, pointing to the bottom line where the status code was listed. "Look, pending final verification, the credit freeze we just did, it might have just saved you $30,000. "But he tried," I said, staring at my brother's name on the screen. "He knew I left. He knew I was angry, and he walked into a dealership and signed my name anyway." I realized then that there was no going back. There was no apology that could fix this. This wasn't a mistake. It was a raid, and I was the target. I sat at Aunt Tessa's kitchen table, my phone lying on the placemat like an unexploded bomb. The morning sun was filtering through the blinds, casting stripes of light across the screen. But the warmth didn't reach me. I felt cold, sharp, and entirely focused. For 17 years, I had communicated with my family through silence. I had agreed, I had nodded, I had disappeared. That strategy had cost me my room, my savings, and my name. Today, I was changing the language. "Are you sure?" Tessa asked. She was standing by the coffee maker, her arms crossed. "If I don't draw the line now, they will erase it again," I said. I picked up the phone. I didn't open the private chat with my mother. I didn't text my father. I opened the family group chat, the one named Calloway Home. It included Mom, Dad, Grant, and recently, Sloan. I typed slowly, ensuring every word was deliberate. "I am willing to speak with you, but only under 2 conditions. 1. My room is returned to me immediately, with Sloan's belongings removed. 2. You provide proof that every debt opened in my name has been paid in full or closed. Until these 2 things happen, I am not coming home." I hit send. The reaction was almost instantaneous. Heather was the first to fire back. "You are blackmailing this family. Who is telling you to say these things? This is not my daughter speaking. This is abuse." I stared at the word, abuse. My mother was an artist when it came to projecting. She took the weapon she was using on me and accused me of holding it. Then Grant chimed in. He didn't care about the emotional angle. He was focused on logistics. "Eden, stop playing games. The dealership is calling me. They said the financing is flagged because of a freeze on your file. You need to come sign a waiver saying it was a misunderstanding so they can process the car. Do it today, or I lose the deposit." I looked up at Tessa. "Grant wants me to sign a waiver. He says he's going to lose the car." Tessa walked over and looked at the screen. Her face hardened. "Do not sign anything. Listen to me. Eden, if you sign a paper saying it was a misunderstanding, you are retroactively authorizing the fraud. You are accepting the debt. You aren't just helping him buy a car. You are handcuffing yourself to his loan for the next 7 years. He says it's just to get the bank off his back," I said. "He is lying," Tessa said flatly. "Or he is stupid. Either way, the bank isn't the enemy here. He is—" My phone buzzed again. "Sloan. We're all really stressed here. Eden, Grant is freaking out. Just be a sister for 5 minutes and help him fix this. We can talk about the room later." I typed my reply. "There is no later. I am not lifting the credit freeze. I am not signing a waiver. I watched the 3 dots of someone typing appear and disappear. They were panicking. They were used to a version of me that folded the moment the volume went up. They didn't know how to handle a wall. I added one more message. If you want to discuss this, we can meet on neutral ground. We can meet at the library on 4th Street. Aunt Tessa will be there with me, and we will put everything in writing. The group chat went silent. They didn't want a witness. They didn't want paper trails. They wanted the kitchen table where they could corner me and talk over me until I gave in. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my father. I answered it on speaker. Eden, Ron's voice was shaky. I could hear the hum of his car engine. He was driving, escaping the house again. Hi, Dad? Honey, you have to stop this, he said. He sounded exhausted, like a man who had been carrying a heavy rock for miles. Your mother is tearing the house apart. Grant is punching walls. I can't take the noise. Eden. Then tell them to stop stealing from me, I said. I didn't know about the cards, he said quickly. I swear. Eden, I knew money was tight, and I knew your mom was moving things around, but I didn't know she used your name. But you know now, I said. You know now, Dad, so what are you going to do? Silence, just the rhythmic clicking of his turn signal. It's complicated, he murmured. Grant needs that car for his image. You know how he gets when he feels like a loser. If this falls through, Eden, please, just come home. Just sign the paper for the bank. We will pay you back. I promise. I'll work overtime. You can't pay back a credit score. Dad, I said. And I'm not going to set myself on fire just to keep Grant warm. You've changed, he said, and it sounded like an accusation. I had to, I replied. Because you wouldn't. I hung up. My hand was shaking, but my resolve wasn't. I looked at Tessa. She nodded once, a silent salute. A few minutes passed, and then a new text arrived from Heather. The tone had shifted completely. The anger was gone, replaced by a sugary, cloying sweetness that made my skin crawl. Baby, I'm sorry we fought. I've been thinking. You're right. You need your own space. If you come home today, I will clear out the study for you. We can paint it whatever color you want. It's smaller than your room, but it's private. We can make it a fresh start. Just come home so we can be a family again. I read between the lines. The study was a closet-sized room without a window on the ground floor. But that wasn't the point. The point was the bait. She was offering me a room to get me physically back into the house. She didn't want me. She wanted the signatory. She needed me in the same room so she could put the pen in my hand and guilt me until I signed the affidavit for the bank. She's offering me the study, I told Tessa. She's playing nice. It's a trap, Tessa said. If you go back there, you lose all your leverage, and you might not get out again with your ID intact. I knew she was right. I picked up the phone for the final time. I wasn't going to debate. I wasn't going to explain. I was going to deliver the verdict. I am not coming home. I am not signing anything. If I see one more fraudulent attempt on my credit report, I will not just block it. I will file a police report for identity theft against whoever submitted it. I sent it. I waited. The air in the kitchen felt heavy, charged with static. The response came 2 minutes later. It wasn't from the group chat. It was a direct message from Heather, and the mask was gone. There was no sweetness, no victimhood, just the cold, hard truth of how she saw me. Fine, if you want to be a stranger, go ahead. But don't come crawling back when you realize the world doesn't care about you. I have to focus my energy on the child who is actually grateful for the life I gave him. I stared at the screen. The child who is actually grateful. She meant Grant, the 22-year-old who stole, who lied, who took everything and demanded more. That was who she chose. Tessa watched me, ready to comfort me, ready to hand me a tissue. But I didn't cry. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't a heartbreak. It was the feeling of a heavy chain snapping. She chose him, I said quietly. I'm sorry. Eden, Tessa said. Don't be, I said. Looking up, my eyes were dry. She just set me free. I put the phone down. I didn't block them. I needed to see what they would do next, but I wasn't waiting for their permission to exist anymore. "What's next?" Tessa asked. "Now," I said. "We make sure they can't hurt me again." I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the witness, and I was going to watch them burn. The sanctuary of Lark and Pine books lasted exactly 4 days before the Callaway toxicity seeped in through the front door. It was Tuesday afternoon, a slow time between the lunch rush and the after-school crowd. I was shelving a stack of new hardcovers in the mystery section, enjoying the smell of paper and the quiet jazz playing over the speakers. For the first time in forever, I felt like a normal 17-year-old girl with a normal part-time job. Then the brass bell above the entrance jingled. I looked up, a reflex of customer service, and felt my stomach drop through the floor. Sloane was standing there. She wasn't wearing her usual lounge clothes. She was dressed up a sharp blazer, designer jeans, her hair blown out perfectly. She looked like a concerned older sister from a television drama. She scanned the room, spotted me, and her face arranged itself into a mask of pity that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Eden," she sighed, loud enough for Mrs. Higgins, the owner, to hear from the back counter. "Thank God we found you." I froze, clutching a book to my chest. "What are you doing here, Sloane?" She didn't answer me directly. Instead, she walked straight to the counter where Mrs. Higgins was organizing receipts. Sloane leaned in, projecting an air of confidential maturity. "I am so sorry to disturb your business," Sloane said, her voice dripping with fake apology. "I'm Eden's sister-in-law. We have been frantic. She ran away during a bit of a mental health episode. We were worried she might be manic again." My blood ran cold. Manic again. I had never been manic in my life. I had never even been to therapy because my parents didn't believe in it. Mrs. Higgins looked at Sloane to me. She was a perceptive woman, but Sloane was a professional manipulator. "She seems fine to me," Mrs. Higgins said slowly. "That is the scary part." Sloane lowered her voice to a stage whisper. "She masks it so well, but then she steals things, or disappears. Her mother is a wreck. We just want to make sure she is safe and not, causing trouble for you." I walked to the counter. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to stand tall. I wasn't going to let her rewrite my reality in my workplace. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my ears. "This is my brother's girlfriend. She is living in my bedroom. That is why I left. I am not having a mental health episode. I am staying with my aunt in Louisville, and my parents know exactly where I am." Sloane turned to me, her eyes wide and wet with fake tears. "Eden, sweetie, stop. You don't have to lie. We just want you to come home and take your meds." She was improvising now, adding layers to the lie. Meds. She was trying to destroy my credibility so that if I tried to report the credit card fraud later, I would look like the unstable teenager crying wolf. "Get out," I said. "Eden," Sloane gasped. "I am asking you to leave my workplace," I said. "You are harassing me." Sloane looked at Mrs. Higgins, expecting an ally, but Mrs. Higgins wasn't Heather Callaway. She didn't buy the performance. "If the young lady asks you to leave, you need to leave," Mrs. Higgins said, her voice clipping at the end of the sentence. "Or I will call the police to issue a trespass warning." Sloane's mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the sneer underneath. She straightened up, smoothing her blazer. "Fine. We tried. Don't say we didn't warn you when the register comes up short." She turned and clicked her heels out the door, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume and poison in the air. I leaned against the counter, shaking. "I didn't steal anything. Mrs. Higgins, I swear." "I know," Mrs. Higgins said, returning to her receipts. "I have a sister like that. Get back to shelving. Eden." But the assault wasn't over. 20 minutes later, the store phone rang. Mrs. Higgins answered it. I watched her expression shift from polite to confused, and then to stern. "No, sir," she said. "I'm looking at her right now, and she is working. No, I will not fire her based on a phone call. "Sir, if you continue to shout, I will hang up." She hung up the phone with force. "That was your brother," she told me. "He claims you stole jewelry from the house before you left, and that you are using this job to fence stolen goods." Grant. He couldn't just be angry. He had to be vindictive. He was trying to get me fired. If I lost this job, I lost my independence. I lost my ability to save for college. "Check the cameras," I said immediately. "Check my bag. Check my pockets. I want you to verify right now that I have nothing." "Eden, I believe—" "No," I interrupted, desperate. "Please, I need a record. I need you to write down that he called, that the accusation was made, and that you investigated and found it to be false. I need an incident report." Mrs. Higgins looked at me with a new kind of sadness. She realized then that this wasn't just a teenage drama. This was a siege. She grabbed a notebook. "Okay, let's log it." That evening, the battlefield shifted to school. I sat in the office of Mrs. Gable, the guidance counselor at my new temporary high school. Aunt Tessa sat next to me. On the desk between us was a printed email. Heather had sent it to the administration of my old school in Cincinnati, copying the district transfer office. "To whom it may concern, please disregard any transfer requests for Eden Calloway. My daughter is currently suffering from acute stress and behavioral issues. She has run away from home and is being influenced by a relative who does not have legal custody. We are working on bringing her home for treatment. Any release of her transcripts is unauthorized." "She is trying to block my transfer," I said, reading the email. "She wants me to be truant, so the state forces me back." "This is standard gaslighting," Tessa said to the counselor, her voice like steel. "Here is the notarized letter of temporary guardianship. Here is the affidavit of residency. Eden is 18 and 11 months. She is safe, she is housed, and she is attending classes. If the district denies her education based on a vindictive email from a parent under investigation for financial fraud, my lawyer will have a field day." Mrs. Gable looked at the paperwork. Then she looked at the email from my mother. "We will honor the transfer," Mrs. Gable said. "But you need to be aware, Eden, your mother called the front office 3 times today asking for your class schedule. We have flagged your file. No information is to be released, but she is persistent. She doesn't care about my grades," I said. "She cares about control." I went home that night and started a new notebook. I labeled it Evidence. I wrote down the date and time of Sloane's visit. I wrote down the details of Grant's phone call to the bookstore. I pasted a copy of the email Heather sent to the school. I wasn't crying anymore. I was building a case. I was learning to think like a lawyer because my family was acting like a prosecution team. They weren't trying to pull me back into a hug. They were trying to drag me back into a cage. The next day at the bookstore, things felt fragile. I jumped every time the door opened. I flinched every time the phone rang. Toward the end of my shift, Mrs. Higgins called me into the back office. She looked uncomfortable. She closed the door, which she never did. "Eden," she said, "we need to talk." "Is it Grant again?" I asked. "Did he call back?" "No," she said. She picked up a pink message slip from her desk. "This call came in while you were on break. It wasn't your brother." She handed me the slip. "Caller Apex Recovery Services. Regarding Eden Calloway. Message urgent matter regarding an outstanding debt. Employment verification requested. A debt collector called here." I felt the blood drain from my face. They aren't allowed to do that. They aren't allowed to call my job. "They asked if you were an employee," Mrs. Higgins said. "They were aggressive. They said something about a default judgment." I stared at the pink slip. This wasn't the credit card I knew about. This wasn't the car loan Grant had tried to open. This was something else. Recovery services meant an old debt, a debt that had gone to collections. "I didn't do this," I whispered. "I didn't confirm you worked here," Mrs. Higgins said gently. "I told them to stop calling. But Eden, this is serious. If collectors are calling your workplace, this isn't just a family spat anymore." I gripped the paper until my knuckles turned white. Sloane's visit had been a distraction. Grant's call had been harassment. But this was the real weapon. My parents hadn't just used my name recently. They must have been using it for a long time, long enough for a debt to rot, go to collections, and come hunting for me 2 states away. They aren't just trying to ruin my reputation, I said, looking up at Mrs. Higgins. They have already ruined my name. I realized then that I couldn't just hide in Louisville. I couldn't just block their numbers and hope it went away. The damage was already in the system. It was hunting me. I put the pink slip in my pocket. It was going into the notebook. I need to make a phone call. I told Mrs. Higgins. Go ahead, she said. I walked out to the alley behind the bookstore. The air was cold. I dialed Tessa. They found me, I said. Not Mom, the debt collectors. They called the store. Pack your notebook, Tessa said immediately. We are going to see a specialist tomorrow. It is time to stop playing defense. I hung up and looked at the sky. I wasn't scared. I was done. They wanted a war. They had one. The pink message slip from the debt collector sat on Tessa's kitchen table, like a radioactive isotope. I had been staring at it for 20 minutes, my mind racing through every possible scenario of how I could have accrued a debt old enough to be sold to a recovery agency. I had never taken out a loan. I had never missed a payment on anything because I barely owned anything. Tessa walked into the room carrying a thick, expandable file folder. She looked older tonight. The lines around her mouth were deeper, and she moved with a heaviness I hadn't seen before. She set the folder down between us. It made a heavy, dull thud. We are done dealing with the symptoms, Eden, she said, sitting down. It is time to look at the disease. What is that? I asked, nodding at the folder. This, she said, resting her hand on it, is the history of your parents' financial life, or at least, the part of it I have been financing. I looked at her, confused. You give them money. For 5 years, Tessa said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were sad. When your father's company, Riverline Mechanical, started to go under, Heather came to me. She said they were going to lose the house. She said they couldn't put food on the table. She begged me. Riverline Mechanical isn't doing well, I asked. Dad always says they are expanding. Riverline Mechanical has been insolvent for 3 years, Tessa corrected. I have lent them over $40,000. Eden, I did it because Heather told me it was for you kids. She said you needed braces. She said Grant needed tutoring. She said the roof was leaking over your beds. I felt a flash of heat in my chest. I never had braces. Tessa. And the roof still leaks in the hallway. I know, Tessa said. She opened the folder and spread out a series of bank transfer receipts. I started tracking it recently. The money didn't go to the roof. It didn't go to you. Most of it went to stabilizing Grant. I looked at the dates. Every time I remember a crisis, Grant crashing a car, Grant needing a lawyer for a misunderstanding at a bar, Grant needing a deposit for an apartment he never moved into, there was a transfer from Tessa. They used you as a piggy bank for him, I said. And they used you as collateral, Tessa added. The reason Heather is terrifyingly desperate for you to stay quiet, the reason she is trying to block your school transfer and threatening you, is not because she misses you. It is because their entire financial existence is a house of cards. If you push for a fraud investigation on those credit cards, the bank will pull the thread. They will look at the mortgage. They will look at the business loans for Riverline. They will see the personal loans. If you expose one lie, the whole house collapses. So I am supposed to let them ruin my life so they don't have to face theirs? I asked. No, Tessa said firmly. I am telling you this so you understand the enemy. They are desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. She reached into the back of the folder and pulled out a single, crisp document. It was a photocopy. There is one more thing, she said. You need to see this. I found it in a pile of papers Heather left at my house last Thanksgiving when she was trying to get me to co-sign a lease. She slid the paper toward me. It was a document titled Guarantor Agreement. It was dated 14 months ago. I looked at the signature at the bottom. It was mine. It wasn't forged. It was my loop, my sharp E, my specific slant. I signed this, I whispered. I tried to remember. 14 months ago. I was 16. Then it hit me. It was a Tuesday morning. I was late for the bus. Mom was frantic, running around the kitchen, shoving papers into her purse. She had handed me a clipboard. Honey, sign this real quick. It is just the updated insurance rider for the car so you can practice driving. I need it filed by noon or you can't get your permit. I had signed it. I hadn't read it. I trusted her. She told me it was for car insurance, I said, my voice shaking. She lied to me while I was eating cereal. It wasn't insurance, Tessa said. It was an address verification and guarantor form for a high-interest personal line of credit. Since you were a minor, it wasn't legally binding in the way they thought, but they used it to establish your residency and attach your name to the account. That is likely the debt that is calling your work now. I felt sick. It was one thing to have your name forged. It was another thing to realize your own mother had tricked you into signing away your future because she knew you wouldn't read the fine print. Why didn't you tell me? I asked Tessa. I suspected, but I didn't know for sure until I ran your credit with you the other day. She said, but Eden, there is good news. There is one thing she hasn't touched. Tessa opened a separate, blue envelope. Your grandfather, my father, didn't trust Heather with money, Tessa said. He knew she had a hole in her hand. So when he died, he set up a 529 college savings plan for you. He made me the custodian. Heather cannot touch it. Ron cannot touch it. It has been growing for 10 years. She showed me the statement. The number at the bottom was substantial. It wasn't enough to buy a castle, but it was enough to pay for 4 years of state university. This is yours, Tessa said. They hate me because I won't release it to them. They have tried. Heather calls me every 6 months with a new emergency, trying to guilt me into cashing it out, but I held the line. I looked at the number. It represented freedom. It represented a life where I didn't have to work at Bright Moss Market until I died. They want me to come back so they can coerce me into signing this over, don't they? I asked. Exactly, Tessa said. If you are under their roof, they can wear you down. They can make you sign a withdrawal form. That is why you can never go back to live there. Eden, not even for a night. I nodded. The picture is complete now. I wasn't a daughter. I was an asset to be liquidated. And there is one more twist, Tessa said. I made some calls about your new roommate, Sloane. I looked up. What about her? I have a friend who works in property management in downtown Cincinnati, Tessa said. I asked her to run a background check on Sloane Mercer. It turns out Sloane has a very colorful rental history. Tessa slid a printed email across the table. Subject tenant inquiry, Mercer. Notes. Evicted from the Vistas 3 months ago. Evicted from Ridley Park Apartments 8 months ago. Pattern of moving in with roommates, getting added to the lease, stopping payment, and then claiming tenant rights to delay eviction. Multiple complaints of theft from roommates. She is a parasite, I said, reading the file. She doesn't have bad luck. She has a strategy. She finds a host, Tessa agreed. She moves in. She isolates the host from their support system. She drains the resources. And when the well runs dry, she moves on. Grant isn't her boyfriend. Eden, he is just her current landlord. And you were in the way. She told me I needed to grow up, I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. She is 22 and she has been evicted twice in a year. You aren't the first person she has targeted, Tessa said, leaning forward and looking me dead in the eye. But you are the first one who kept the receipts. I looked at the pile of papers, the bank transfers, the photocopy of my tricked signature, the email about Sloane's evictions, the credit report. For days, I had been feeling like a victim. I felt like a little girl who had lost her bedroom. But looking at this paper trail, I realized I held the detonator. They had built their entire survival on the assumption that I would be too scared, too young, or too nice to fight back. They were wrong. I don't want to just defend myself anymore. Tessa, I said, I picked up the photocopy of the document I had signed. I want to go on the offensive. Good, Tessa said, because the debt collector called me back while you were in the shower. They are preparing to serve you with court papers. Let them, I said. I felt a cold clarity wash over me, replacing the fear. If they take me to court, they have to put everything on the record. And if everything is on the record, Mom and Grant go to jail. I closed the folder. I am done crying about my room, I said. Tomorrow, we will call the lawyer, and we don't ask for a truce. We ask for a surrender. The first domino fell on a Thursday morning. 3 days after I froze my credit. It didn't make a sound, but the shockwave was instant. The banks had started sending verification letters because the accounts were flagged for fraud. The credit card companies froze the lines of credit immediately. They sent certified letters to the billing address my parents' house demanding proof of identity and a notarized affidavit from the account holder. That meant me. Heather didn't call me screaming this time. She sent an email. Attached was a PDF document titled, Statement of Authorized User, Eden. The email read, The bank made a mistake and locked the accounts. I need you to sign this form and scan it back to me by noon. It just tells them that you gave me verbal permission to manage your finances. It will clear everything up. I read the document. It wasn't a correction. It was a confession. If I signed it, I would be legally admitting that the debt was mine and that I had authorized every single purchase. I would be on the hook for thousands of dollars, and the fraud investigation would vanish. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to Tessa and the lawyer she had consulted. When the noon deadline passed, the smear campaign began. My phone started buzzing with messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. My cousin in Dayton texted, I can't believe you are trying to get your own mother arrested. Tessa has really brainwashed you. My grandmother called and left a voicemail. Her voice trembling, Eden. Your mother says you are blackmailing them. She says you are on drugs. Please, honey, just go home. I listened to it in the break room at the bookstore. It hurt. It felt like being stabbed by 1,000 tiny needles. My mother was scorching the earth, painting me as a drug-addled, ungrateful traitor to anyone who would listen, just to cover her tracks. But the lies couldn't stop the financial rot. That afternoon, my father called. He didn't sound like himself. He sounded deflated, like a balloon that had lost its air. Eden, he said, Riverline lost the contract with the county today. I am sorry, Dad, I said, and I meant it. They ran a background check for the bond renewal, he said, his voice dull. Because I used your name. Because I listed you as an officer in that shell company your mother made me set up last year. The fraud alert flagged the whole application. They think I am laundering money. I gripped the phone. I didn't know I was an officer of a company. Dad? I know, he whispered. I signed for you. It was just for tax purposes. But now, it's over. They pulled the contract. That was 60% of our revenue for the year. You did this, I said, my voice shaking. I didn't call the county. The truth did. I just wanted peace, he said, the same old refrain. And now I have nothing. The chaos at home was spilling over. I learned the next part from a frantic voicemail Heather left me later that night. Sloan was gone. The credit freeze meant the money tap had run dry. Grant couldn't buy the car. The credit cards didn't work at the mall. And true to Tessa's prediction, the parasite detached itself from the dying host. Sloan had packed her bags while everyone was arguing and slipped out the back door. But she didn't leave empty-handed. You came back here, Heather screamed in the voicemail. I know you did. You sneaked in while we were dealing with the bank, and you took my diamond studs and the silver service set. Sloan saw you running down the driveway. I replayed the message for Tessa. She is delusional, I said. I have been at work all day. There are cameras. She knows you didn't do it, Tessa said, stirring her tea. But if she admits Sloan stole them, she has to admit she was wrong about Sloan, and Heather would rather accuse her own daughter of burglary than admit she gave her house to a grifter. It was a masterclass in denial. They were cannibalizing themselves. Grant and Sloan, the perfect couple my mother had tried to protect, had turned on each other the moment the cash stopped flowing. They weren't in love, they were accomplices, and the heist had failed. Then came the call that forced the final confrontation. I was walking home from work when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it, expecting another relative. "This is Mr. Henderson from Apex Recovery," a male voice boomed. "I am looking for Eden Calloway." "This is her," I said, stopping on the sidewalk. "We have not received a response regarding the judgment debt of $4,000, he said. "If you do not set up a payment plan by 5 o'clock today, we are marking your credit file as non-cooperative and proceeding with wage garnishment." My hand shook, but I remembered what Tessa had drilled into me. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice loud over the traffic. "I am a minor. I have initiated a fraud alert on my credit file. I am requesting that you validate this debt in writing and mail it to my attorney. I am also informing you that any further calls to my personal number or my workplace will be considered harassment under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "I see," he stammered. "We will mark the file." He hung up. I exhaled. I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't cried. I had used the law as a shield. "It is time to end this," Tessa said when I got home. "We are not waiting for them to sue you. We are calling a meeting." 2 days later, we sat in the conference room of a small law firm in downtown Louisville. Tessa had hired a family law attorney, a sharp woman named Sarah, to mediate. We had also asked a representative from the credit union to be present on speakerphone to record the dispute. The door opened, and the Calloways walked in. They looked terrible. Heather looked 10 years older. Her makeup applied heavily to cover the stress lines. Ron looked like a ghost, staring at the floor. Grant looked furious, wearing a wrinkled shirt, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Sloane was notably absent. They sat on the opposite side of the mahogany table. "This is ridiculous," Heather started, throwing her purse on the table. "My daughter drags us to a lawyer's office like we are criminals. We are family." "We are here to discuss the identity theft," Sarah, the lawyer, said calmly, "and the fraudulent debts opened in Eden's name." "It wasn't theft," Grant snapped. He slammed his hand on the table. "It was boring. We were going to pay it back. She is making a federal case out of a family loan." "I didn't agree to the loan, Grant," I said. I looked him in the eye. "I didn't sign the papers. You did." "Mom said it was fine," Grant yelled. Turning to Heather, "You told me to sign her name. You said she wouldn't care." The room went silent. Grant realized too late what he had said. He had just confessed to conspiracy to commit fraud in front of a lawyer and a recorded line. Heather's face went pale. She tried to pivot. I said we would handle it. Eden, look at your father. He lost his contract. We are going to lose the house. Are you really going to destroy us over a few credit cards?" "You didn't just take money," I said. "You took my room. You took my safe. You tried to buy a car in my name while I was sleeping in a laundry room. We gave you a roof for 17 years, Heather cried, tears streaming down her face now. "We raised you. And this is how you repay us. By siding with her." She pointed a shaking finger at Tessa. "She didn't side with me," Tessa said coldly. "She sided with the truth." "It is just money," Grant shouted. "Why are you being so selfish? We are family. You are supposed to help us." Then he said it, the sentence that peeled back the skin of our entire life and showed the rot underneath. He looked at Heather, frustrated and whining. "You told me she wouldn't fight back. You said she was too scared to lose the family, so she would just take it." I felt the air leave the room. There it was, the strategy. They hadn't underestimated my intelligence. They had banked on my fear. They thought my love for them was a weakness they could exploit. They thought I would light myself on fire just to keep them from being angry with me. Ron put his head in his hands. Heather looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I stood up. My legs felt solid. My hands were steady. "You're right, Mom," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the room. Heather looked up, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She thought I was breaking. She thought the old Eden, the convenient Eden, was coming back. I was scared, I continued. I was terrified of losing you. I spent my whole life making myself small so I wouldn't lose my place in this family. I looked at the stack of fraud affidavits on the table, the papers that would clear my name and likely indict theirs. But you didn't leave me a choice, I said. You made me choose between having a family and having a life. I picked up the pen. And now, I said, looking straight at her, I am terrified of losing my future, and that scares me a lot more than losing you. I signed the first affidavit, then the second, then the third. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the only sound in the world. It was the sound of a bridge burning, and for the first time, I loved the heat. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee, but to me, it smelled like Judgment Day. The table was a vast expanse of mahogany separating my past from my future. On one side sat the Calloway family Heather, Ron, and Grant. On the other side sat me, Aunt Tessa, and Sarah, the attorney who was about to surgically dismantle their lies. I didn't shake. I didn't look down. I had the notebook. Let us begin, Sarah said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply opened a binder. We are here to establish the liability for 3 credit cards, 1 personal loan application, and a defaulted consumer debt, all in the name of Eden Calloway. Heather immediately pulled a tissue from her purse, dabbing at eyes that were dry. This feels like a trial, she sniffed, looking at the mediator. My daughter is treating us like criminals. I just wanted to keep a roof over our heads. I just wanted peace. You didn't want peace, Mom, I said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. You wanted luxury. I pointed to the highlighted lines on the statement. $400 at a spa, $200 for Grant's sneakers, $600 for new curtains in the living room. None of this kept a roof over our heads. This is theft. You are so sensitive, Heather snapped, dropping the tissue. You always make everything about you. We were going to pay it back. It was a family system. It was a parasite system, Tessa cut in. She leaned forward, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. My father left money for Eden's education, a specific fund. You couldn't touch it, Heather, so you decided to steal her credit score instead. You didn't do this to survive. You did it to maintain the image that Grant is successful and that you are a good mother. I am a good mother, Heather shrieked. I gave her everything. Sarah raised her hand. Let's answer 3 simple questions. Question 1. Who used the social security number belonging to Eden Calloway? Silence. Question 2. Sarah continued. Who signed the applications? Grant shifted in his chair. He looked at the window, his jaw tight. Question 3. Who received the benefit of these funds? The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. My father, Ron, was staring at his hands, which were clasped, white-knuckled on the table. He looked like a man whose soul had left the building years ago. Dad, I asked softly, did you know? Ron looked up. His eyes were red. He looked at Heather, then at Grant, and finally at me. I saw the letters, he whispered. A few months ago, I saw a bill from the bank. And what did you do? I asked. I asked your mother, he said, his voice cracking. And she told me. She told me that you knew. She said you agreed to help out. She said, Eden can handle it. She's strong. Don't worry about it. So you let it happen, I said, because it was easier than fighting her. I just wanted the yelling to stop, he confessed. You traded my future for a quiet evening, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a eulogy for the relationship I thought we had. Grant couldn't take the attention of Dad. He slammed his hand on the table again. This is bull. We are talking about a few $1,000s I was going to pay off the car loan as soon as my commission check came in next month. It was temporary. I just needed the car to look professional. So you admit it, Sarah said, looking up from her notes. You admit you used Eden's name to secure the vehicle financing because your own credit was insufficient. Grant froze. He realized he had walked right into the trap. It was a misunderstanding. I thought Mom had asked her. Don't look at me, Heather cried, turning on Grant. I told you to be careful. I told you not to be greedy. You told me to do it. Grant yelled back. It was Sloane, Heather shouted, pivoting to the empty chair where Sloane should have been. It was that girl. She stole the information. She stole the card numbers. She is the criminal here, and we are all victims of her manipulation. It was a good performance. If I hadn't been prepared, I might have faltered. I might have wondered if maybe, just maybe, my mother was innocent, but Tessa reached into her folder. We anticipated you would blame the person who isn't here to defend herself, Tessa said. However, under the discovery process for the fraud claim, we pulled the phone records and text logs. Tessa slid a single sheet of paper to the center of the table. It was a screenshot of a text message exchange from 4 months ago. Sender Mom, recipient Grant, message. Don't use your dad's info for the application. His score is tanked. Just use Eden's. She never checks her mail. She won't dare sue me even if she finds out. I can handle her. Heather stared at the paper. Her face went gray. The good mother mask didn't just slip. It shattered. I stood up. I felt 10 feet tall. You were wrong, I said. Heather looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear. For the first time, she wasn't looking at a child she could bully. She was looking at a woman she couldn't control. You gave my room to a stranger on my 17th birthday, I said, my voice steady and clear. You threw my grandfather's letters in the trash, but that wasn't the worst thing you did. You took my name, you took my identity, and wore it like a costume because you were too ashamed of your own failures. Eden, please, she whispered. We can fix this. Don't sign the affidavit. If you file this, they will charge me. You charge me first, I said. You charge me $1,100 for a phone. You charge me for your curtains. You charge me for your pride. I looked at Sarah. I am ready. I signed the fraud affidavit. I signed the police report request. I signed the intent to prosecute for identity theft. Grant put his head on the table. Ron started to weep. A quiet, broken sound. Heather sat frozen, staring at the paper that proved she had sold her daughter for parts. We are done here, Tessa said. We walked out of the room. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out of the building, into the cool air of Louisville, and I took the deepest breath of my life that evening. The silence in my room was different. It wasn't the silence of hiding. It wasn't the silence of walking on eggshells. It was the silence of peace. I sat on my bed, in my room, in a house where my name belonged to me and no one else. My phone lay on the nightstand. It didn't buzz. I had blocked them all. The police would handle the communication from now on. The banks would handle the debt. I picked up the charcoal pencil from my nightstand and opened a fresh page in my sketchbook. For years, I had drawn pictures of places I wanted to go, imaginary landscapes where I could be safe. Tonight, I didn't need to imagine. I looked around the room. The walls were bare, but they were mine. The future was scary, but it was mine. I drew a door, and then I drew it opening. I had lost a family. Yes, but I had found the person they had tried so hard to erase. I had found Eden, and she was going to be just fine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe relaxing in your own room? Let me know in the comments below. And please don't forget to subscribe to Veronica Revenge Stories. Like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this journey with even more people.